My name is Sara Malik. I am 41 years old. I manage the Alderton Hotel in Portland, Oregon, and on a Tuesday morning in September, I realized that the man in room 412 had been living in my hotel for 4 years. Not staying, living. There is a difference. Staying is what guests do. They arrive with a purpose, a conference, a wedding, a city they are passing through. They unpack partially. They sleep in the bed. They leave. Thomas Hartwell had been in room 412 since October 14, 2019. He paid his bill every month without fail, always on time, always the full amount. Never a complaint, never a late checkout, never a request that created a problem. He was the easiest guest I had ever had. He was also the only guest I had ever had who had been with me for 4 years. I had not thought about this carefully until the morning my assistant manager, James, placed his file on my desk and said, "Sara, did you know Mr. Hartwell in 412 has been here since before the pandemic?" I looked at the file, October 14th, 2019. I said, "Yes, he renews monthly. He's a good guest." James said, 4 years, Sara. He's been here for 4 years. I said, "I know." James left. I sat with the file in front of me, and for the first time in 4 years, I asked myself a question I should have asked much sooner. Why does Thomas Hartwell never leave?
Let me tell you about Thomas first. He was 67 years old when he checked in, retired. He had told us at check-in that he was in Portland for a family matter and expected to stay several weeks. Several weeks became several months. Several months became a year. A year became 4. He was a quiet man, impeccably polite. He ate breakfast in the restaurant every morning at 7:30 a.m., eggs, toast, black coffee. He read the physical newspaper, not his phone, the paper. He walked in the small garden behind the hotel every afternoon at 3 p.m., regardless of the weather. I had seen him out there in the rain more times than I could count. He carried a compact umbrella and he walked the same path every time. 12 minutes. I had timed it once out of idle curiosity. He had visitors occasionally, not many, a woman in her 50s who came perhaps once a month. Always the same woman. They sat in the lobby for an hour. They spoke quietly. She always looked sad when she left. He never had luggage delivered. He never had packages. He used the hotel laundry service, and I knew from the records that his wardrobe was modest. 3 pairs of trousers, 4 shirts, 2 jackets. He lived in room 412 with 4 years of his life compressed into a single suitcase worth of possessions, and I had never once asked him why.
The object at the center of everything was a newspaper. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. 3 days after James put the file on my desk, I was passing through the lobby at 7:45 a.m. Thomas was at his usual table. Eggs, toast, black coffee, newspaper open. I stopped. I said, "Mr. Hartwell, good morning. Do you have a moment?" He looked up. He had this specific calm of someone who is never surprised by anything because they have spent a long time expecting very little. He said, "Of course, Miss Malik. Please sit down." I sat across from him. I said, "I wanted to check in personally. You have been with us for 4 years. I want to make sure everything is comfortable, that your needs are being met." He said, "Everything is excellent, as always. You run a very good hotel." I said, "Thank you. Is there anything we could do better for you? Anything you need that we haven't thought to provide?" He looked at me for a moment. He said, "Miss Malik, are you asking me why I'm still here?" I said, "I suppose I am, if that's not too personal." He folded the newspaper carefully. He placed it on the table beside his coffee cup. He said, "It is personal, but I think I have been here long enough that you deserve an honest answer." He looked at his hands. He said, "Portland every weekend to visit her. Then the driving became too much.
Then I thought I would come and stay nearby for a few weeks." He paused. He said, "She doesn't know who I am anymore. She hasn't for 2 years. But I know who she is, and I know that if I am 12 minutes away, I can be there when she needs something, when she has a difficult night, when the staff calls." He picked up his coffee cup. He said, "The Cedarwood is 12 minutes from this hotel. I timed it the first week." 12 minutes. The same 12 minutes he walked every afternoon in the garden. He had been measuring the distance between himself and his wife every single day for 4 years. I sat across from Thomas Hartwell, and I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, "Does she have good care there?" He said, "The care is adequate. The staff is kind, but adequate is not the same as good, and kind is not the same as attentive." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, 3 months ago, I arrived at 11 p.m. because the facility called to say she was distressed. When I arrived, she had been sitting in the common room alone for 40 minutes. No staff member had stayed with her. No one had sat with her." He said it without anger, just with the flat, factual delivery of a man who has been managing grief for 6 years and has learned to report it without letting the weight of it change his voice. He said, "She was alone for 40 minutes in a state of distress, and I was 12 minutes away, and no one thought to call me sooner." I said, "Did you report it?" He said, "I spoke to the administrator. I was told it was an unusually busy night. I was told it would not happen again." I said, "Did it happen again?" He looked at me. He said, "Twice." I went back to my office. I sat at my desk. I thought about Thomas Hartwell walking 12 minutes in the garden every afternoon, measuring the distance, keeping himself close. I thought about his wife, alone, in a common room for 40 minutes. I thought about a man who had compressed 4 years of his life into a suitcase and a newspaper and eggs and toast at 7:30 a.m. so that he could be 12 minutes away. Then I did something that was not strictly my business as a hotel manager. I called my sister. Her name was Amara Malik. She was an elder care advocate. She had spent 18 years working on behalf of people in care facilities who could not advocate for themselves. I told her what Thomas had told me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sara, which facility?" I said, "Cedarwood Memory Care, Morrison Street." She said, "I know Cedarwood." The way she said it told me everything. She said, "Has he filed formal complaints?" I said, "I don't think so. He seems to have accepted it." She said, "That is what happens. Families accept things they should not accept because they are afraid of complaining will affect the care their loved one receives. It is the most common form of institutional silence I deal with." She said, "Sara, can you ask him if he would speak with me?" I want to pause here, because what my sister found when she started looking into Cedarwood is the part that made Thomas Hartwell's 4 years in room 412 make complete sense. If you have ever watched someone accept something they should not have had to accept because they were afraid of making things worse, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what Amara found at Cedarwood and what happened because of it is the reason Thomas Hartwell is no longer living in my hotel. Thomas agreed to speak with Amara. They met in the lobby on a Thursday afternoon. I brought them tea. I left them alone. They spoke for 2 hours. Amara came to my office afterward. She sat down. She said, "Sara, Cedarwood has 47 residents. In the past 18 months, there have been 11 documented incidents of inadequate supervision. 3 of those incidents resulted in minor injuries to residents. 1 resulted in a fall that required hospitalization." She said, "None of these incidents were reported to the state licensing board." I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because the facility's administrator has been managing the documentation to avoid triggering mandatory reporting thresholds.
The incidents are recorded internally, but categorized in a way that keeps them below the level that requires external notification. I said, "Is that legal?" She said, "No, it is a violation of Oregon administrative rules for licensed care facilities, and it has been happening for at least 18 months. She said, "Thomas knew something was wrong. He had no framework to understand what or how to address it, so he stayed close. He measured the distance. He made himself available at all hours." She said, "He has been functioning as informal oversight for a facility that should have been formally overseen." For 4 years, Thomas Hartwell had been living in room 412 because the system that was supposed to protect his wife was not working properly, and he had known it without knowing how to name it. Amara filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Department of Human Services on a Monday morning. She had 47 pages of documentation. Thomas's account, the internal incident records she had obtained through a formal records request, 3 other family members she had identified and spoken to in the 2 weeks after meeting Thomas. All 3 had similar experiences. None had filed formal complaints. All 3 provided statements. The DHS investigation opened within 10 days. It ran for 3 months. The findings were significant. 11 documented incidents of inadequate supervision confirmed. 3 additional incidents identified by investigators that had not been internally recorded at all. Staffing levels consistently below licensed minimums on night shifts. 1 incident of medication administration error that had been recorded incorrectly. The administrator was sanctioned. Her license was suspended pending a formal review. Cedarwood was placed under enhanced oversight. A state monitor was assigned to the facility for 6 months. Staffing requirements were enforced immediately. 3 staff members were let go. 6 new staff members were hired, with proper vetting, with proper training requirements.
Thomas Hartwell checked out of room 412 on a Saturday in March, 5 months after the morning James put the file on my desk. He came to my office before he left. He sat across from me. He said, "You owe me nothing, Mr. Hartwell. You paid your bill every month." He said, "I want to give you one anyway." He said, "When Margaret first came here, I thought I was just solving a logistics problem. The driving was too far, the hotel was convenient, it was supposed to be temporary." He said, "But temporary became permanent because I couldn't leave. Every time I thought about going home, I thought about the 40 minutes, about the fall, about the night I arrived at 11 p.m. and found her alone." He said, "If I was 12 minutes away, I could fix it. I couldn't fix the disease, I couldn't fix what was happening to her, but I could be 12 minutes away." He looked at his hands again. He said, "Your sister gave me something I didn't know how to find myself, a way to make the institution responsible for what it was responsible for, so that I didn't have to be the only thing standing between Margaret and that system that wasn't working." He said, "I am going home for the first time in 4 years, not because the problem is solved, because there is now a monitor at that facility checking every week, because the staffing levels are enforced, because 3 other families are now engaged and watching." He said, "I am not the only person standing between Margaret and that system anymore." He stood up. He extended his hand. I shook it. He said, "You run a very good hotel, Miss Malik." He picked up his suitcase. He walked out. I went to the garden that afternoon at 3 p.m. I walked the path Thomas had walked every day for 4 years. 12 minutes. It felt like nothing. Just a loop around a small garden behind a hotel. But for 4 years it had been everything. The distance between a man and the woman he loved. The measurement of how quickly he could reach her. The daily practice of staying close when there was nothing else he could do. I walked it once. Then I went back inside. Room 412 has a new guest now. A couple from Seattle. Conference. 3 nights. They will leave on Thursday. That is how hotels work. People arrive, people leave. Thomas Hartwell arrived in October 2019 with a family matter and a suitcase.
He left in March with a complaint filed, a monitor assigned, and a facility that is now being watched the way it should always have been watched. He left because someone finally asked the right question. Not, why won't you leave, but why can't you? Here is what 4 years of a newspaper and eggs at 7:30 a.m. taught me. The people who stay in one place without explanation are not always difficult. Sometimes they are faithful. Sometimes they have found the one position in the world where they can do the most good, and they have stayed in it because no one has yet given them a better option. Ask the question, not why are you still here, but what do you need that you haven't been able to ask for? The answer might be 12 minutes, and 12 minutes might be everything. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. Same ending every time. She stayed calm, she stayed quiet, then she won.